Hi, and welcome to Power Play. I'm Mike LeCouture. Tonight, the country mourns for Tumbler Ridge.
For the parents, for the families, for the people of Tumbler Ridge. All of us here will make sure that the supports are here, knowing that they will never be adequate.
The support is pouring in from across Canada as the small BC community grieves the murder of 8 people. More than 24 others were also injured in one of the nation's worst mass shootings. We're live in Tumbler Ridge for the latest on the investigation, and we'll speak to the town's mayor on how his community is doing at this hour. Then, a rare Republican rebuke of Trump.
Well, I've got to represent my district, and Canada and the state of Washington are have a very close trading relationship.
The president has veto power, and there's not a 2/3 majority in both chambers to override the veto, so it's not going to change the policy.
6 GOP members of Congress joined Democrats to back a resolution that seeks to end some of the tariffs President Trump imposed on Canada last year. It's a largely symbolic vote, but does it signal something more inside the Republican Party? And what does it mean for our country? We'll ask a former advisor to the Prime Minister on Canada-U.S. relations and former U.S. ambassador to Canada. Plus, collaboration in the Commons. What's behind the new sense of cooperation between the Liberals and Conservatives? Do both parties want to avoid an election? We'll talk about that a little later on in the show with our front bench. Today, we've got Christy Clark, Marco Mendicino, James Moore, and Monty Solberg. First, though,
I let her go to school with her brother Ethan in the morning, and I soaked in that moment watching them walk in the door together for whatever reason, and I didn't know it would be the last time they'd go to school together.
We knew there was a real situation, and my goal at the time was, I have these 15 kids to get out of here. I want these 15 kids to be safe. That's the hard part to see, that's the little kids are gone.
we begin tonight in British Columbia, where the tight-knit community of Tumbler Ridge continues to grieve the 8 people who were murdered and 27 others injured Tuesday afternoon. This is a live look right now at a growing memorial outside Tumbler Ridge Secondary School. Flowers, candles, and stuffed animals are being left there as people grapple with the fallout of one of Canada's worst mass shootings in this country's history. Last night, hundreds of mourners attended a candlelight vigil, exchanging comfort and moments of silence in the memory of those victims. Today, we're learning more about those who were killed in that shooting. The mother and stepbrother of the suspected shooter were found dead in a nearby residence. They are 39-year-old Jennifer Jacobs and 11-year-old Emmett Jacobs. Now, 5 students and an educator were also murdered at the school. They're 12-year-old Takara Lampart, 12-year-old Kylie Smith, 12-year-old Abel Matsuaya, and 13-year-old Ezekiel Schofield, also among the dead, 12-year-old Zoe Benoit, and 39-year-old Shenandoah Avigana Durant. Now, the suspected shooter was also among those who died from what police say was a self-inflicted injury. They've been identified as 18-year-old Jesse Van Rootselaar, who RCMP say had previously dropped out of school. Investigators say it's too early to determine a motive. Prime Minister Mark Carney is expected to visit Tumbler Ridge tomorrow to attend a vigil, and he'll be joined by Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, as well as a number of other federal leaders. Now, CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson has been leading our coverage from the small community, and he joins us right now. Now, Andrew, you've been speaking to a number of people in that tight-knit community. How are they dealing with this immense loss today?
Well, Mike, the first hours of the raw grief has kind of transformed into we're seeing more people coming together. There was a candlelight vigil last night. Hundreds came out, huddled together, trying to hold each other up. Those names and those faces of those victims, many teenagers, was just fully released by the RCMP. Of course, around town, people have known since the shooting Tuesday who died. Media have not been reporting all of those names, trying to be respectful, trying to be careful, trying to get this right. Now that that's all out there, I think a lot of people might be uncomfortable with that here. This is a place that is most comfortable off the beaten path, out of the spotlight, and they've had no choice after one of the worst mass shootings in Canadian history to be thrust right into the spotlight and telling their stories, telling the stories of these teenagers who they don't want to be forgotten, and they want people to know who these people were and not only talk about the shooter or talk about motive. As we said, we might never know a motive. Speaking of, RCMP have said because the shooter is dead, so many complex emotions for people here. Grief, anger, frustration, confusion, and definitely still present is disbelief. This is actually happening in this town of 2,400 in northeastern BC.
Yeah, and in that sense of trying to make any kind of sense of this, Andrew, I mean, how many people that you're speaking to are actually trying to figure out what happened and why it happened? I mean, that is clearly something that may not be top of mind right now, but we know that the RCMP also not giving it an update just yet. Do we have any idea when they may give another update on their investigation?
Police haven't indicated when they may give another update on their investigation. What people are wondering here, what the questions people have said they want answered from police, from government. Premier David Eby was asked it last night. Is police have said the shooter, Jesse Van Rootselaar, had a history of mental health issues. Police had come to the family home multiple times. Van Rootselaar had been apprehended under the Mental Health Act and taken to hospital before. Weapons had been seized from the home, then returned. The questions people have center around why were those weapons were returned? What was the scenario there? And is there enough mental health support in a small town of this size? In hindsight now, those things need to be examined, and those are the questions people are asking. And police have said those answers will come. Premier Eby said last night those answers will come. He has questions, but not yet.
Yeah, clearly a lot more grieving to do right now, Andrew, and we appreciate the delicacy with which you're obviously doing in your reporting, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. We appreciate you doing this, Andrew.
Thanks, Mike. Take care.
That was CTV National News, BC Bureau Chief, I should say, Andrew Johnson. Now, while those in the community are showing their support for each other, politicians and political leaders from across the country are doing the same. As I'd mentioned, Prime Minister Mark Carney will be attending a memorial in Tumbler Ridge tomorrow, and he'll be joined by Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet, NDP interim leader Don Davies, and Green Party leader Elizabeth May. Today, BC Premier David Eby did lay flowers at that growing memorial today. He was also at that vigil last night, as Andrew just mentioned, where he became emotional as he described the profound tragedy of the mass shooting, but he also underlined the incredible resiliency from that community.
The speaker talked about Maya, who's in the hospital with her family right now, a young girl who's fighting for her life and just clinging to life right now. And we were asked as a group to take a moment of silence to pray for however people pray or reflect, to send strength to that family right now. And that moment for me is representative of the profound tragedy. You know, a beautiful child who went to school, was full of joy and love, who's clinging to life in a hospital right now, and the other children who have died.
Joining me now to talk about that resiliency is the mayor of Tumbler Ridge, Daryl Krakowka. Thank you so much for being with us in this incredibly difficult time.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
You've called your town a family. So how is your family doing today?
I think we're seeing the family, moving around a bit more, and like I've said all along, giving the ear to people that need an ear, a shoulder, if our families need a shoulder or hugs. And I think we're seeing that. We've seen that somewhat yesterday, but I think we're seeing it more today. And again, it is one big family, and we need to support each other, and especially some of our family have lost loved ones. And we're starting to see people grieving and just reaching out and talking to each other, I think, which is so important for the community of Tumbler Ridge and the big family that we have here.
I can imagine the toll that it's taken on you as well. How are you doing today?
Yeah, just processing and stuff like that. But again, I don't think it's about me. It's about the big family of Tumbler Ridge. It's about the people that have lost loved ones in our family. It's about all the first responders that, had to attend to the tragic unfolding of it at the scene of the secondary school. I think that's what it's about. I think it's about making sure, the teachers are okay, all the young youth and our children of our community that were there and had to live through that scene. That we need to be there for them, have an ear for them, shoulder, give them hugs, make sure they have that support of our family.
You've talked a lot about that support over the last 36 hours and what needed to come into the community. What is happening on that front in terms of making sure that the people who do need it the most are getting that support going forward?
Yeah, I mean that was probably the biggest thing I gave to the province. Minister Nina had reached out with public safety and Minister Josie Osborne, Minister of Health, and that was the thing. I mean, if things were still unfolding, didn't have all details, things just unfolding and just learning things. And I said, I can tell you one thing: we're going to need counselors, boots on the ground, mental counselors, mental crisis counselors. That's what we're going to need right now. Boots on the ground in Tumbler Ridge. If not the night of Tuesday, for sure the next day, which would have been Wednesday. And the province and Northern Health, we had 5 individuals come in yesterday from Northern Health. I know School District 59 and the Minister of Education, working through their links, had brought in counselors through School District 59 as well for staff support for the children and youth. And again, that is so important for this family of Tumbler Ridge to have those counselors here for everybody to be able to reach out to.
How much of a bigger conversation needs to happen on that front for having that support going forward? A lot of people have spoken about the mental health needs, and especially in remote regions such as your own there. What do you think needs to happen, not only in the days going forward, but the weeks and months, to make sure that there is that support there?
Yeah, my conversation with Premier Eby last night was that we're not looking for short-term help when it comes to counselors. We're looking for the long-term. I said to him, it's not days, weeks, months. To me, I'm looking at 6 months, a year. To me, whatever is needed to make sure we have these counselors with feet on the ground, not this doing it remote via Zoom and stuff. So, he really committed to saying that they're here for us, and as we need things, the government's going to support the district.
The Prime Minister and other federal leaders are going to be going to that memorial tomorrow. I wanted to ask you, how important is that support for your community?
I think that, in my thoughts is, that's Canada supporting us. We have, leaders that aren't having party lines. They're coming together, supporting us as Canadians, bringing that support from Canada to Tumbler Ridge. So I think it's important. It's what a tragedy is all I can think of. And I think it's good to have the leaders here and stuff, and so we can tell them what our needs are. We need that long support of counselors for our community and looking out long term. I think it's a good thing that they're going to come and show the support of Canada to our family of Tumbler Ridge and be there for our vigil. And when we talk about a vigil, like, we have our First Nation neighbors as well that'll be attending Tumbler Ridge from the Peace region. And again, I just think it's important that we see the support of BC and the Peace region, but also Canada. I mean, we've been reached out right across the world. So I think it's so important.
I was talking to our colleague, Andrew Johnson, who said that there was not an RCMP update today on the investigation. We all know it will take time. But how important is it for the residents of your community to get the answers as soon as possible to the questions that continue to linger over this right now?
Yeah, I mean, I leave that to the RCMP, and I understand. I mean, I want answers. Our family of Tumbler Ridge wants answers. We just need to make sure they're doing their investigation, and when they're able, I know they will come forward with their the information and updates, and we just got to give them time to do the job that they need to do, and it does take time.
Just before I leave you, I wanted to go back to the support that you were talking about that you've seen from right across the country for Tumbler Ridge. What is your message to Canadians as they mourn with you and your community?
Yeah, I mean, we're mourning and it's overwhelming, but we appreciate the world and all Canadians. You know, we know they're grieving as well. They're grieving with us. I mean, nobody wants to see it anywhere in the world, never mind a small community, having a tragedy like that where we have, you know, some of our family members not going home to their family. And yeah, it's overwhelming. But again, we're strong here in Tumbler Ridge, and as our family comes together and grieves as a family and support the ones that have lost loved ones and the ones that are fighting in the hospitals and the injured, we're going to come out strong. We're going to become stronger because of this. And you know, we just thank everybody across Canada and the world for reaching out.
Mayor, we appreciate you taking the time on this this difficult day, and we're sending you a lot of strength. Mayor of Tumbler Ridge, BC, Daryl Krakauer, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Still to come, about a half dozen House Republicans voted with the majority of Democrats to overturn President Trump's tariffs on Canada. Now, it's a symbolic blow to his trade agenda. So what does this mean for Canada? We'll break it all down with our panel of experts on Canada-U.S. relations right after this.
Well, I've got to represent my district, and Canada and the state of Washington have a very close trading relationship. It's valuable, and a lot of Canadian-owned businesses are in my district that hire a lot of people. So I've got to do what's best for the people I represent.
And I say this as somebody that supports the president's agenda of onshoring, reshoring manufacturing. He's absolutely right. There's a lot that we need to be doing. There are a lot of trade imbalances and trade abuses that are happening, but we need to do it the right way, consistent with the Constitution. And I worry about the precedent that we might be setting if there's a Democratic president.
It was a rare rebuke of the White House agenda yesterday as several Republicans joined Democrats to vote against President Trump's tariffs on Canada.
On this vote, the yeas are 219 and the nays are 211. The joint resolution is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Cheers could be heard in the chamber last night as a resolution to rescind some of those tariffs that Trump had imposed on Canada passed 219 to 211. The vote is largely symbolic, as it will still need to be approved by the U.S. Senate and then approved by Trump, who is unlikely, I should say, to sign it into law. But last night's vote saw 6 Republicans break with Trump and join Democrats to pass the measure, signaling a growing willingness from the president's own party to defy him on his trade agenda. Trump took to Truth Social as the vote unfolded, threatening Republicans who voted against the tariffs, saying that they would seriously suffer the consequences come election time. So does this vote signal cracks in the Republican support for Trump's trade agenda as midterms approach? And will it give Canada more leverage when it comes to negotiations? Joining me now to try and answer those questions are Brian Clow. He was the Deputy Chief of Staff to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and lead on Canada-U.S. relations, and Gordon Giffin. He was the former United States Ambassador to Canada from 1997 2001. Thank you both for being here. Gordon, I want to start with you on this one. When you see which Republicans broke ranks, what does that tell you about President Trump's grip on the party and how things could be shifting?
Well, I think it's an early indication that over the course of the next 6 months, we're going to see a little more month-by-month erosion in the support for the president among the Republican caucus, both in the House and the Senate. I've said for some time now, as we get through the Republican primary season, which will end somewhere in the June-July timeframe, and he can no longer threaten to run someone against them in their primaries, his threats will be of less vitality to many of the Republicans in both the House and the Senate, and you'll start to see a few begin to peel away from supporting him as much as they have.
Brian, this is a very different Congress from the first Trump presidency when you were inside the Prime Minister's office. Can you compare the two and how things might be changing here?
Yeah, things are very different now than they were in the first Trump term. Yesterday's vote, it's clearly a good thing on its own as far as these votes go. As you said, it is symbolic. It doesn't carry much weight, but seeing 6 Republicans stand up to their own president, I'm not sure we would have seen 6 stand up to the president 6 months ago. So it's a good step, but it's a small step. Broadly speaking, though, the Republican Party in the United States is still very aligned with this president. They mostly aren't calling him out. They aren't standing up to his tariff policies. And that is very different from Trump in the first term, when we had a lot of allies, both in public and in private, standing with us against Trump's trade policies. I remember being with the former Prime Minister, tour of Capitol Hill. We sat down with former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and Mitch McConnell said to us, NAFTA's been a good thing for Kentucky. I won't try to do his Kentucky drawl. But he said it was a good thing for Kentucky, and everything Mitch McConnell did, both in public and privately, was frankly good for Canada-U.S. trade. We need to see more of that in this second term of Trump.
Brian, I'm curious how you think yesterday's vote landed inside the PMO.
I'm sure they were encouraged by it, but they also know they are facing, and the country is facing, a very, very tough situation. We've been living through, just in the last few weeks, threats from the president on Bombardier jets, threats from the president this week about the Detroit-Windsor Bridge. Just yesterday, the report that the president continues to muse about privately with his aides, muse about withdrawing from the USMCA altogether. So the vote itself was, I'm sure it was welcomed as good news in the Prime Minister's office, but I'm also sure they're not overly focused on it.
Gordon, do you see this at all as an opportunity now for Canada when you consider that Trump is very transactional as an individual? So do you think that there is an opening here for the Prime Minister to maybe be in a better position to negotiate? Or do you think that there will have to be election or electoral impacts on the Trump administration that may, come, let's say, in the November midterms?
Well, I think I'm inclined to think that it's an important event in the moment, and by that I mean as we move towards the renegotiation phase on what we call USMCA. I think it's important for there to be statements like that where it's declared that Canada's different. Canada's relationship, both as a trade matter, but also as a historic ally, makes Canada substantially different than dealing with many of the other countries where President Trump really doesn't have to deal with much pushback because there's not a large number of people in the Congress who have a vested interest in the relationship. Canada is different. The shared border is different. The relationships that have been built between premiers and governors makes it different. And it's not just the economics, it's the long-term engagement that we have had for generations with Canada. And I think statements like the one that was made in the House of Representatives will cause pause in the White House. The president may not immediately get it, but his staff incrementally will. And it's a very constructive statement for the broad relationship, not just the USMCA-CUSMA negotiations.
So, Gordon, how do you see this setting up now when you consider some of the factors that Brian also put on the table there? I mean, going from the Davos speech to then the threat against Bombardier Aerospace on this side of the border when it came to Gulfstream jets, and then also the Gordie Howe Bridge. And then, as Brian had mentioned as well, this reporting that he may be willing to just walk away from USMCA. Do you see this building towards a critical point here as we get towards July when a decision does have to be made on that?
Well, it's very difficult to predict the conduct of the current occupant of the West Wing of the White House. On any given night, you'll get some sort of off-the-wall expression, Gordie Howe Bridge being one of them. I think the system is starting to work, however. The institutions are starting to work. The Republicans have been intimidated by him for a year. That intimidation is eroding day by day. And as I said, once the primaries are over, there'll be more that have the courage of their convictions to line up with members of the Democratic caucus in both houses to define what the limits of his power are. And in fact, he can't withdraw without congressional approval. And some of the things that he spouts off about, whether it's Bombardier, whether the Gordie Howe Bridge, it's just sort of the eruption of the moment, and it goes away in 4 or 5 days. So don't be too concerned about some of those events, and let's stick to whether or not we're putting the coalitions together to have rational outcomes over time.
Brian, just in closing, do you think for the Prime Minister right now, it is basically hold position, wait to see what comes next, or is it pick up the phone and see if a conversation wants to be had?
Well, I think it's both. And we're seeing the federal government show a willingness to be patient and not rush back to the table, desperate to do any sort of deal. And frankly, that's a good thing for the country. If you go into these talks, if you're calling up the Americans begging to get back to the table, that puts you in a weaker position, and it doesn't make for a good negotiation. At the same time, we know that there are continued conversations going on between the two countries. The Prime Minister and the President have spoken just in the last week. How that translates into the actual detail, the granular detail of the CUSMA review, we'll have to see. Those conversations aren't yet happening in a detailed way, and I think we'll see that pick up in the weeks and months ahead.
Okay, we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Brian Clow and Gordon Giffen, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Good to be here.
Still to come, what are the political implications on this side of the border? Well, we're going to talk about that with our front bench. Today we have Christy Clark, Marco Mendicino, James Moore, and Monty Solberg. They're going to talk a little bit more about all of that movement down south.
I'm disappointed in the vote, but the president has veto power, and there's not a 2/3 majority in both chambers to override the veto, so it's not going to change the policy in the end anyway. But I think this is a fruitless exercise and a pointless one, and I'm disappointed in it.
That was reaction from Speaker Mike Johnson after the U.S. House of Representatives voted against President Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada. 6 Republicans joined Democrats in a bipartisan push against the trade agenda. Now, the motion did pass, but it didn't get 2/3 majority, meaning when it lands on Trump's desk, he will almost certainly veto it. As results of the vote became clear, President Trump took to Truth Social, calling Canada, quote, among the worst in the world to deal with. He added, this country has, quote, taken advantage of the United States on trade for many years. Even as Trump continues to double down on his love for tariffs, last night's vote does signal wavering Republican support for the president's policies. So does this blow another hole in Trump's trade agenda, especially as midterms approach? And what might it mean for Canada-U.S. relations? Let's bring in our front bench. Former BC Premier Christy Clark is here. She's a senior advisor with Bennett Jones. Marco Mendicino is the former chief of staff to Prime Minister Mark Carney, and he's the former Liberal cabinet minister. He's now senior counsel and strategic advisor for Castles. CTV political analyst and former Conservative industry minister James Moore is also here. He's now policy advisor at Edelman, and former federal Conservative cabinet minister and MP Monty Solberg. He is the CEO of New West Public Affairs. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. Christy, start with you on this one. I think a lot of people are reading a lot into this vote. It doesn't remove any of the tariffs, and Trump has a number of other levers he can pull, even if the Supreme Court does overturn them. But do you think that this does present somewhat of an opportunity for the Carney government here?
Well, yeah, it's typical, though, in the U.S. when the midterms arrive, the president suddenly, his or her power starts to seep away a little bit because those elections are so important, and incumbency eats away at your popularity in certain states more than others, and so some of those swing states become very vulnerable. And in this case, you've got 6 of them, voting with the Democrats in the Congress, and those are ones mostly that are affected by the agricultural tariffs that are on. So you think about potash as an example, vital for fertilizer in agricultural states. 80% of that comes from Canada, most of it from Saskatchewan. And so, the problem is that you increase the cost of those inputs, you make it much harder for those businesses to succeed, but also you raise prices for everybody in America. And the reality is, and I think it's starting to hit home with some voters in the United States, is if you start raising prices on tariffs, it's Americans that pay the new cost of that. So I think it's a risk for President Trump on the, kind of in terms of the electoral math. Having said that, though, this has to still pass the Senate, and then it's still probably going to be vetoed by President Trump. But that's not an outcome that he's hoping to get to, because I think he certainly, if he, depending on how many seats they lose in the midterms, which is normal for in most midterms for the incumbents, it could be an embarrassment for him, and it could be sort of the first real comment the American public has been able to make on his tariff strategy overall.
So, Monty, what should the Carney government do here going forward? I mean, so, speaking to Brian Clough, former senior advisor to the Prime Minister, or Deputy Chief of Staff, I should say, to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, it's like there's an opportunity here, but also they've done pretty well by just, standing pat here.
Well, they should just stick to their guns. They have done a good job by standing pat. And let's face it, the president has a record of backing down on some of these pronouncements. He talks about 100% tariffs if Canada is going to trade with China. Well, that's not going to happen. He's stepped away from that. And I think there's every likelihood that he will see that he cannot go into the U.S. Midterms without having a trade deal, because he's got all kinds of swing states that depend on trade with Canada. And you're starting to see some of those, states in the U.S. heartland push back. You've got a big agriculture lobby made up, I think, a coalition of 40 agricultural groups who have come out publicly and said that they are committed to trying to get the president to agree to a new trade agreement with Canada. So that's a pretty strong sign, that he needs to listen to his own Congress and the people that vote for him typically, and get on board and support a trade agreement with Canada.
Marco, it wasn't so long ago, I think it was about 2 summers ago, that François-Philippe Champagne, I believe it was as industry minister, went down to the U.S. and continued that sort of charm offensive. It was ahead of the election and trying to really sort of impress upon the Americans how important Canada-U.S. trade is. We haven't seen a lot of that happening recently. Do you think there's an opportunity here for Canadian lawmakers to, continue to leverage those connections that they've made and sort of, continue to prime the pump here and say, hey, look, you had 6 vote against Trump here. You guys should really consider how important this is to you.
Yeah, hard to imagine a more charming, effervescent personality than François-Philippe Champagne for those of us who know him. But, is it too early to send a bouquet of flowers and a thank you card to the 6 Republicans who voted to remove these tariffs? Look, it was a narrow moral rebuke of, I think, a poorly founded tariff policy against Canada. And while it's tempting to exaggerate the victory, I think it's right to be level-headed in our assessment, precisely because of some of the reasons that have already been stated. One of which is that the resolution is not binding. The second of which is that the vote still essentially fell down along partisan lines. And the third of which is that I think it is a broader comment on, how much control the president continues to exercise over the Republican Party in Congress, because we know many of those Republicans are in states who profit from good trade with Canada. Mm-hmm. And so I think going forward, you're right, there is an opportunity for the government. I hope that yesterday's vote serves as a bit of a permission or a license for more of our friends in the United States to speak up in favor of trade with Canada. Because while it may have been a bit of a moral victory for Canada, I think it's a hollow victory for Americans who are paying more for food, who are paying more for fuel, who are just generally paying more across the board, and in part because of these higher tariffs.
James, it sort of occurs to me that, and we will be talking about this in our next segment, about how there is sort of more collaboration going on this side of the border. Do you think that this also presents that kind of opportunity when you consider that it seems like there is that opening, as we've all sort of, agreed upon here, that on this side that there could be more of that opportunity, even as the MP, Jamil Javani, came back from the U.S. from his trip as well. Do you think that there's something to be done on politics on this side of the border when we see what happens there with this vote?
Well, I think there's broad stroke co-alignment between the two governing parties in Canada about the North American platform and free trading with the United States as best as possible, and backstopping industries that are under threat by Donald Trump's tariffs. So I think that there is room in that front. Pierre Poilievre's put out an olive branch. I think the Prime Minister has been gracious in his public comments as well. But I think in this whole dynamic in the United States, I think our watchwords need to be keep calm and carry on, and recognize what's happening in the United States, that while we're talking about this vote in Congress over tariff policy, it's not getting noticed in the United States in media, informed media, or with the broad general public, because I don't know if you noticed or not, but the United States is having a bit of a moment here, and it's not a good moment. From the streets of Minneapolis and people getting shot to the cultural divide, the Epstein files, Pam Bondi perjuring herself before a congressional committee and embarrassing herself, to the manosphere bro culture podcasters who are abandoning Donald Trump over the Epstein files and Minnesota, to the shifting in the American economy. The United States is undergoing a crunch here. And then you've got primary season coming up on the congressional side and a third of the Senate. Donald Trump saying he's going to implement himself and get engaged in the midterm campaign. The United States is going through an extraordinary political division here. And if Canada sticks its head out and puts its hand in the tiger's mouth here, it's going to get chomped off here, either by President Trump or others. Our obligation should be to the domestic Canadian economy, to engage in those reconsideration conversations about the CUSMA agreement when the time comes, make sure that we have our roundtables and policy workshops moving forward effectively within Canada, and stay out of the way. And don't become the next chapter in this now decades-long Donald Trump daily reality show. We have 1,000 more days left of this presidency, and we should just keep calm and carry on and focus on our own backyard. And that's what I think Canadians expect of the Prime Minister and expect of this Parliament.
And be happy that China hasn't taken hockey away from us yet, as Trump
predicted. The day is young, but no, not yet. Yeah.
Yeah, we got that win over Czechia, so I think that's important. Okay, we're going to have to take a quick break here. So what's up with that new spirit of collaboration that I was talking about between the Liberals and Conservatives? Well, our front bench is going to be back to talk about this new tone shift and what it all means for politics on Parliament Hill. Stay right there. Power Play. We'll be right back.